Welcome to Talk Treatises.
It is wonderful to be back in the parlor.
We are doing something a little different today. If you've been with us for a while, you know that usually we take a stack of articles, maybe some modern market research, perhaps a white paper on a trending technology, and we try to make sense of the news.
Right, we try to map the current moment.
Exactly, but today we're going back to the source. We are stepping into the parlor, pouring a glass of something strong, metaphorically speaking, of course, and engaging in a professional analysis of philosophy and classic literature.
That's right. And I think it's important to say that while the subject matter is older, the goal here remains exactly the same. Rigorous text analysis. We aren't here to gossip about the author's love life. We aren't here to memorize dates for a university quiz. And we certainly aren't here to just nod along politely.
No, absolutely not. We are here to see if the arguments hold water.
We want to take the text apart and see how the machine works. Does it still run?
I love that. Does it still run? And we want to capture the vibe of, a post-dinner conversation between two well-read friends who aren't afraid to go into the dark corners of the human experience.
And speaking of dark corners,
we have quite the guide today. We are covering Studies in Pessimism by Arthur Schopenhauer.
A cheery title for a Tuesday.
Isn't it just? Specifically, we are looking at a collection of his essays that includes titles like On the Sufferings of the World, The Vanity of Existence, On Suicide, and the highly controversial On Women.
Right. And before we dive into the specific arguments, I think we need to introduce the voice we're dealing with. Not a biography, like you said. We don't care about his childhood disputes right now. But who is the character speaking to us through these pages?
That's a great way to frame it. The character.
If I had to describe the voice of Schopenhauer in this text purely based on the prose, I'd say he sounds like the smartest, grumpiest man in the room.
Yes, that's it.
He is curmudgeonly, absolutely brilliant, sharply observant, and darkly witty. He isn't just sad, he's aggressive about his pessimism. There was a swagger to his misery.
A swagger to his misery. I love that. He really is aggressive. It feels like he's grabbing you by the lapels and saying, look at this mess. Look at it closely. Stop pretending it's a garden party.
Exactly. Yeah. And to understand why he is shaking us by the lapels, you have to look at the era. We are in the mid-19th century. The intellectual climate is post-Kantian, but more importantly, it is a fierce reaction against Hegelian optimism.
Okay, so unpack that for us. What was the prevailing mood he is reacting to?
At the time, there was this dominant idea, driven largely by Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, that history was a rational process, that it was moving toward perfection.
The spirit, right, the Geist.
The Geist. The idea was that the rational is real and the real is rational, that humanity was on a constant upward trajectory toward some ultimate freedom or self-awareness.
So the vibe of the time was everything is getting better and everything happens for a good, logical reason.
Precisely. It was a philosophy of progress and cosmic purpose. And Schopenhauer looked around at the wars, the poverty, the sheer cruelty of nature, the internal struggle of the human mind, and he just said, absolutely not.
He threw a massive wrench into the gears of that optimism.
A very large wrench. His central thesis, which really permeates every single essay we're about to discuss, is that existence is not a rational process moving toward good. He argues that existence is essentially suffering.
Okay.
It is driven by a blind, voracious, striving force he calls the will to live. And this is the kicker. He argues that happiness, the thing we all strive for, is merely a negative state.
What do you mean by negative?
He means it's just the absence of pain.
Okay, let's unpack this because that's the mission of this deep dive. We are going to dismantle that optimistic worldview that life is inherently good. We're going to look at his arguments for why boredom and pain are the two poles of human existence. And we're going to look at his structured, albeit very controversial, views on everything from gender to noise pollution.
It is a rigorous system, even if you don't like the conclusions. It's structurally sound, even if the building is a dungeon.
Huh, I like that. So let's jump straight into that dungeon. Section 1, the metaphysics of suffering. Schopenhauer starts with this idea of the negativity of happiness. When I first read this, I thought, come on, happiness is a real feeling. I know what joy feels like. But he argues it's not. He says we have the definitions backward.
Right. He argues it is not positive in the sense of adding something to you. It is negative in the sense of subtracting a deficit.
A deficit.
Think about it this way. He says, we feel the stone in the shoe, but we do not feel the comfort of the shoe itself.
That is such a relatable image. You walk around all day not thinking, my foot feels great, the arch support is sublime, the temperature of my toes is optimal, you just don't register it?
Exactly. The wellness of the foot is invisible to you. But the moment a tiny pebble gets in there, suddenly your entire consciousness is dominated by the foot. The pain is positive, meaning it makes itself known, it demands attention. The comfort is negative, it is simply the absence of the pebble.
So a state of no pain doesn't register as a positive feeling. It's just neutral. It's the baseline.
It's the baseline. And he applies this to health in general, doesn't he? We don't feel health. Health is just the silence of the organs. You don't sit there and feel your liver processing toxins or your stomach digesting food smoothly.
No, you only feel those organs when they're failing you, when you have indigestion or a headache.
Precisely. And that's his core logic here. All satisfaction, or what we call happiness, is really just the termination of a desire or a pain. You have a craving, that's the suffering. You satisfy it, that's the happiness. But the happiness only exists relative to the previous pain.
So if I drink a glass of water, the pleasure isn't in the water itself. The pleasure is in the removal of the thirst.
Exactly. And if you aren't thirsty, the water gives you no pleasure. In fact, if you are forced to drink when you aren't thirsty, it becomes torture. So the good feeling is entirely dependent on the preexistence of a bad feeling.
Which implies that to increase happiness, you first have to increase suffering. You have to make yourself thirstier to enjoy the water more.
That is the trap. And once the pain is gone, once the thirst is quenched, you don't stay happy. You just return to a neutral state, a 0 point, until the next desire hits you. It's a zero-sum game where the best you can hope for is 0. Most of the time, you're in the negative.
He takes this further, though. He argues there is a fundamental asymmetry between pain and pleasure. He uses a pretty visceral analogy involving animals to prove that pain is the stronger, more real force.
He does. And it's brutal. He asks the reader to compare the feelings of an animal that is eating to the feelings of the animal being eaten.
Oof. That puts it into perspective.
It is brutal, but it's incredibly effective. Think of a lion taking down a zebra. The lion feels pleasure, sure. It satisfies its hunger. But that pleasure is just a momentary release, a maintenance of its system. It's a fleeting good.
Right.
Now compare that to the zebra. The terror, the physical agony, the total destruction of its being. The pain of the prey ranges into the infinite. The pleasure of the predator is just a blip.
So the net amount of feeling in that one interaction is overwhelmingly negative.
Correct. The pain vastly, vastly outweighs the pleasure. Schopenhauer views the world as a system where one being's maintenance requires another's destruction, and the suffering side of that equation is always heavier. The will to live is essentially eating itself over and over again.
And we're all part of that food chain in one way or another.
We are, which leads to his other image, that of us as lambs in a field. We're skipping around, grazing, having a great time, totally unaware that the butcher is watching us from behind the fence.
It's a haunting image.
It is. We are these lambs playing under the eye of the butcher who represents fate or nature. We see one person get sick, another lose their fortune, another die young, and we think, oh, that's an exception. That's a tragedy, that poor person.
We see it as a deviation from the norm.
Exactly. And Schopenhauer says, no, that is the norm. The tragedy isn't the exception, it's the rule. We are just waiting for our turn with the butcher. Sickness, poverty, old age, death, these aren't bugs in the system, they are features.
It effectively kills the idea of it won't happen to me.
It makes "it won't happen to me" the most delusional sentence in the human language.
But surely he can't think we should just eliminate all struggle. I mean, even he admits that suffering seems to have a function, right? He seems to suggest we need it.
He does, but purely for mechanical stability. It's not for moral growth or anything noble like that. He uses a physics analogy.
Okay.
He says that just as a physical body would burst if you removed all atmospheric pressure, a human being would essentially explode with arrogance and folly if you removed all need and hardship.
So we need the pressure to keep us in shape, to keep us from flying apart into pure chaos.
Metaphysically, yes. Imagine a world where every desire was instantly gratified. You want food, it appears. You want love. You have it. You want success. It's yours without effort. Schopenhauer says we wouldn't handle it.
We'd go crazy. We'd get bored.
We would be unmanageable. We'd become monstrous. He says suffering is the ballast that keeps the ship of life stable. Without it, without worry, labor, and trouble, we wouldn't just be happy. We would engage in reckless behavior, wars, or mass hysteria just to vent that energy. The will creates a pressure from the inside that needs resistance from the outside to maintain equilibrium.
That leads to one of my favorite metaphors in the entire text. He reframes how we should look at the world entirely. Most people, especially in his time and honestly in ours too, view the world as a testing ground or maybe a place to build a kingdom.
A place to achieve something.
Right. And Schopenhauer says, no, look at it as a penal colony.
A penitentiary.
Yes, a prison. And it changes the entire context of your life.
It really does. If you view the world as a place where you are supposed to be happy, everything that goes wrong feels like a personal injustice. You feel cheated. You ask, why me? Why did I get a flat tire? Why do I get the flu?
You feel like the universe has broken a contract with you.
But there is no contract.
Exactly. There was never a contract. Schopenhauer says if you view the world as a penal colony, a place we have been sent to be punished for the crime of existence itself, then everything makes perfect sense.
The misery, the conflict, the unfairness.
It's all part of the sentence. You don't walk into a prison and complain that the bed is hard. You expect the bed to be hard. That's what a prison is. By changing your expectation from pleasure to punishment, everything falls into place.
And he says this actually makes us nicer people. That seems so counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Usually, viewing life as a prison makes people bitter and cruel.
Right. But ironically, he argues it breeds tolerance. If we are all inmates in a prison, we shouldn't be addressing each other with titles of distinction like Sir or Your Honor, or pretending we are better than one another.
We're all just prisoners. We are all prisoners. We should address each other as soci malorum fellow sufferers.
Malorum.
It means partners in misery. He thinks this shared wretchedness should breed tolerance, even compassion. If I know you are suffering just as much as I am, simply by being alive, driven by the same hunger, aging towards the same death, I'm less likely to hate you for your minor annoyances and more likely to pity you. It converts judgment into a kind of universal compassion.
Fellow sufferer. I might start using that at the grocery store when the line is long. After you, fellow sufferer.
It might get you some strange looks, but it is philosophically sound.
Okay.
It levels the playing field. The king and the beggar are both inmates, they just have different cells.
So we've established that happiness is negative, the world is a slaughterhouse, and life is a prison. A great start.
And we're just getting warmed up.
Let's move to section 2, the vanity of existence and the trap of time. This is where he attacks the very structure of our daily lives.
This is where it gets really existentially uncomfortable for anyone who feels like time is constantly slipping away. Schopenhauer argues that the only reality is the present moment. The past is just a memory. The future is just imagination.
Okay, that sounds pretty standard, like mindfulness 101.
But he takes a much darker turn. He says the present is constantly vanishing. The moment it exists, it becomes the past. He says that which has been exists no more. It exists as little as that which has never been.
Wow. Wait, so my memories of yesterday have the same reality as a movie I never saw?
Ontologically, yes. It essentially deletes your biography. It devalues everything you've achieved. If you were a king yesterday, it's gone. It has the same status as a dream. Right now, in this second, it makes no difference to the reality of the moment.
It's terrifying.
It is. And because the present is always slipping into the past, we can never actually rest. He compares us to a man running downhill.
If he stops, he falls.
Exactly. To stay upright, he has to keep running. Existence is constant unrest. We are a pole balanced on a fingertip. We have to keep moving to stay balanced. There's no such thing as arriving and just sitting there in contentment.
Because if we did arrive, if we did stop, we'd hit the other pole. He talks about life swinging like a pendulum, right? This is a core concept.
This is one of his most famous concepts. The pendulum of life swings between 2 points: need and boredom.
Pain and boredom.
Right. They're essentially the same thing for him. Let's trace the arc. When we have a need, hunger, shelter, safety, sexual desire, we are in pain. We are in a state of lack. We strive and struggle to satisfy that need. We work, we fight, we plan.
And that struggle gives our life meaning for a while.
We give it a direction, at least.
Mm-hmm.
And then we succeed. We get the food, we get the house, we find a partner.
And the moment we satisfy it, the moment the need is gone,
we don't enter a state of permanent bliss. We are immediately attacked by boredom. The struggle gave us a purpose. Without the struggle, we are left with the emptiness of our own existence. We're left alone in the room with ourselves, and it's terrifying.
And he says, this is proof that life has no intrinsic value.
Yes. If life had positive value in itself, if just being was a delightful experience, we would be happy just sitting in a chair existing. We wouldn't need anything else.
Yeah.
But we aren't. We are terrified of being left alone with our existence. That's why we invented cards and games and gossip and social climbing.
He says we invented honor and ambition just to kill the time we fought so hard to secure.
Think about that. It's like we work 40 years to save up for retirement, and then the first thing we have to do when we retire is invent a dozen hobbies so we don't go crazy from the lack of struggle.
It's absurd. We fight to secure our existence, and as soon as it's secure, we don't know what to do with it. We have to kill time.
Think about that phrase, kill time. We are trying to hasten the end of the very thing we are desperate to keep. It's the ultimate paradox.
He uses the microscope analogy here too, which I find fascinating.
He does. He says human life looks like a tragedy when you see it close up. All the specific pains and struggles, the broken hearts, the diseases, the individual suffering.
But when you zoom out,
when you look at it through the telescope of history, or from a great distance, it looks like a comedy.
A comedy? How so?
In the sense of a farce. It's just a ridiculous, pointless bustling of ants. All that worry, all that rushing about for what? To survive a few more years, to produce another generation of ants who will rush about just as pointlessly? It's the sheer vanity of it all. We're bustling about taking ourselves so seriously, but from a distance, it's just a silly dance.
And this ties directly into his view on hope.
The deception of hope.
He is not a fan.
Not at all. He says hope makes fools of us. We live ad interim in the meantime. We are always saying, I'll be happy when I get that job, or life will really start when I get married, or when the kids move out, then I'll travel.
We treat the present as something to be endured, just a bridge to a better future.
But the future never comes. Or rather, when it does come, it's just another present that we are already looking past to the next future. He says the tragedy is that a man realizes at death that the waiting was the life. He spent his whole time preparing to live and never actually lived.
That is a gut punch.
Yep.
It's the irony that we ruin the only reality we have, the present, by worrying about a future that will be, by his logic, just as empty.
It is the ultimate tragic irony of the human condition. We are always becoming, never being.
Well, if life is suffering, a penal colony, and a trap of time, the natural next question, and the subject of Section 3, is suicide.
And here, Schopenhauer takes a very nuanced stance. This is often misunderstood, so we need to be very careful and precise here.
He starts by destigmatizing it. He points out that the religious prohibition against suicide, specifically in the West, is kind of made up.
He argues it is a clerical invention. He's very direct about this. He notes that there is no explicit prohibition against suicide in the Old or New Testament. He says the clergy had to invent philosophical arguments because they didn't have biblical ones, and he proceeds to just tear those arguments apart.
He also mocks the law. He says it's absurd to punish someone for attempting suicide.
It is the criminality argument. He says essentially, what penalty can frighten a man who is not afraid of death?
Right. It's a hollow threat.
Completely.
Yep.
If a man is willing to die, telling him we will punish you is meaningless. You cannot punish someone who has already decided to leave the jurisdiction of existence.
And he contrasts this with the ancients, with the Stoics.
Right. The Stoics, Pliny, the Hindus, they often viewed voluntary death as a noble escape, or even a religious act. Pliny said that the ability to die when you choose is the greatest gift God gave to man amidst all the miseries of life. It's only modern monotheism that views it as a crime. Schopenhauer wants to reclaim that ancient right to one's own person.
But, and this is the massive twist, the part everyone gets wrong. Schopenhauer argues against suicide.
He does, but not for moral reasons. This is the crucial point. He doesn't say it's wrong or sinful. He says it is a clumsy experiment.
A clumsy experiment? That's such a strange way to put it. Why? What does he mean?
Because of his metaphysics. Remember, for Schopenhauer, the essence of the world is the will to live. It's this driving, striving force. He argues that the person who commits suicide doesn't actually want to stop living.
They don't.
No, they want to live. They just don't like the conditions of their life. They're rejecting the pain, the suffering, the specific circumstances.
So they're rejecting the phenomena, not the will itself.
Exactly.
Okay.
They are saying, I want life, but I don't want this suffering. By destroying the body, they are merely destroying the appearance of the will. They aren't destroying the will itself. It's futile.
I've heard an analogy for this. It's like a movie projector.
That's perfect. It's like trying to end a horrible movie by smashing the screen.
Right. The movie is still projecting. The signal is still there. You just broke the receiver.
That's precisely his argument. Schopenhauer says suicide is a failure to truly deny the will. True liberation for him can only be done through asceticism, through conquering desire, quieting the will, and reaching a state of non-striving. Suicide is an act of very strong will, not a denial of it. It is an act of passion and affirmation of life, just not this life.
That is so counterintuitive. It's a total reframing, and it leads us perfectly into section 4, immortality. If smashing the screen doesn't end the movie, what happens when the screen breaks naturally? What happens when we die?
This section is structured as a Socratic dialogue between two characters. Thrasymachos, the skeptic who wants personal survival, and Philolethes, the philosopher who represents Schopenhauer's views.
I love the title of this concept, the all-and-nothing paradox.
It directly answers the question, what will I be after death? And Philolethes answers, all and nothing.
Which sounds like a riddle, a cop-out almost.
It does, but it's completely consistent with his system. As an individual, John Smith, born in 1980, likes pizza, has these specific memories. You become nothing. Your individuality is a temporary phenomenon bound by time and space. It ends.
Okay, that's the nothing part.
Right. But as the will, the underlying essence that drove John Smith, the life force itself, you remain everything. You, the particular manifestation, are gone. But the fundamental reality of which you were a part, that remains. You return to the universal.
He uses the sleep analogy here, which I found surprisingly comforting, actually.
It is. He asked Thrasymachos, if you were unconscious for 3 months or for 10,000 years, what is the difference to you?
To my conscious experience, there is no difference. It's just a blink.
Exactly. Consciousness doesn't experience the gap. The waking up is the only thing that matters. So he argues that death is essentially a state of timelessness for the individual. To the will, 10,000 years and 1 second are the same. It just finds a new manifestation.
But Thrasymachos, the skeptic, isn't buying it. And I get his point. He says, I don't care about the universal will. I want to be me. I want my individuality. I want to remember my life.
And this is where Philolethes delivers the final blow. He counters by saying that individuality is actually a limitation. It's a defect. It's not a perfection.
A limitation. We spend our whole lives trying to cultivate our individuality.
But he argues that the I that wants to keep existing is actually just the universal will to live, which is common to all things. It's the same force in you, in me, in the lion, in the tree. The idea that I am separate is an illusion created by space and time. To lose your individuality is actually a gain. It's like a drop of water returning to the ocean. The drop is gone, but the water remains.
So we are fighting to keep something, our individuality, that is actually a prison cell.
Exactly. We're fighting to stay in the penal colony because it's the only cell we know. Schopenhauer suggests that true peace comes from realizing you are not the wave, you are the ocean.
Let's pivot from that cosmic perspective to section 5, psychological observations. This is where Schopenhauer steps back from the heavy metaphysics and just looks at human behavior. And he is razor sharp.
He is a master observer of human folly. He turns his gaze from the cosmos to the living room, and he's just as brutal.
The most famous image here, of course, is the porcupine parable.
A classic. It explains so much about social life. He imagines a group of porcupines on a cold winter day. They are freezing, so they huddle together for warmth.
But when they get too close,
they prick each other with their quills. The closeness causes pain, so they move apart.
But then they get cold again.
Exactly. So they're caught in this cycle, freezing or getting stabbed, huddling and dispersing. Eventually, after much trial and error, they find a moderate distance where they're just warm enough to survive, but don't prick each other too badly.
And he says this is politeness.
Yes, this is society. The need for society, the coldness, drives us together because we are empty and bored on our own. But our repulsive qualities, our ego, our bad habits, our sharp edges drive us apart. Politeness and manners are that moderate distance. It's a system of conventions that allows us to be near people without getting hurt.
And he adds a little sting for the intelligent person. He says, if you have enough internal warmth,
intellect and character,
right, then you can stand outside the huddle.
That's his ideal. The man with internal warmth doesn't need to huddle. He doesn't need society to cure his boredom. So he can stay far away and avoid the pricks entirely. It's a very introverted, solitary ideal. The price of company is compromise.
He also makes a really sharp distinction between hate and contempt. I always thought they were similar, but he separates them completely.
He says they're opposites. Coming from different faculties, hate comes from the heart. It's emotional. It's a product of the will. If you hate someone, you care about them in a negative way. You want to destroy them. It takes energy.
So hate is a form of engagement. It acknowledges the other person's importance.
Correct. Contempt, however, comes from the head. It is a cool intellectual judgment. It is the realization that someone is so insignificant, so flawed, that they are beneath notice.
So hate is hot, contempt is cold.
Yes. And he says true contempt is silent. If you express your contempt, if you tell someone, I despise you, you're actually showing that you care enough to want to offend them. And that's a form of hate. True contempt just ignores the person because they aren't worth the breath. It's treating them like a stone in the road. You don't get angry at the stone, you just step over it.
Brutal. He also has this concept of the common man versus the genius.
This goes right back to his will versus intellect dynamic. He defines a common person, which is most of humanity for him, as someone who represents only the species. They are, in his words, manufactured goods.
Manufactured goods. He really does not hold back.
Not for a second. He says they were just like millions of others. Their entire life is driven by the will be emotion, desire, animal drives. They only think about things in relation to themselves. Is this good for me? Can I eat this? Does this person like me? Vulgarity, to Schopenhauer, is the triumph of the will over the intellect.
So what is genius then? The opposite.
Precisely. Genius is when the intellect breaks free from its master, the will. A genius can look at the world objectively, not just in terms of what can I get from this. The genius contemplates the world as a picture, disconnected from their own petty needs. They see the eternal idea of the thing, not just its utility for their survival.
Okay, we have arrived at the elephant in the room. Section 6. On women.
The sexist sequer.
We need to be very clear here. This is a deep dive into the text. We are reporting on what Schopenhauer wrote in the mid-19th century. We are not endorsing it. In fact, some of this is going to sound pretty jarring to modern ears.
Say the very least. But to understand his philosophy, we have to look at how he applied it to gender. It is part of his system, even if it is the most dated and offensive part. He calls women the sexist sequer, the second sex.
He views them as intermediate developmentally.
Right. He says women are intermediate between the child and the man. He describes them as childish, frivolous, and short-sighted.
But he links this to his metaphysics again, doesn't he? He says, because they are short-sighted, they live entirely in the present.
Which he actually admits has a benefit. He's not entirely negative here. He says it makes them cheerful companions. Because they don't worry about the distant future as much as men, they can enjoy the moment more fully. But he claims this makes them poor planners and incapable of taking a broad, objective view of things. He claims they see only what is immediately in front of them.
Then he gets into the lack of justice argument. This is where he brings in nature's equipment.
He argues from a kind of brutal biological determinism. He says nature gave lions claws and bulls horns to protect themselves. Since nature gave women less physical strength, it had to equip them with something else.
And that something is craft, by which he means
dissimulation, lying. He argues that women have an instinctive capacity for cunning as a defense mechanism. And because of this reliance on craft rather than strength and reason, he claims they lack an innate sense of justice or truth. He goes so far as to say perjury is more common among women because they view deception as a valid tool, whereas men view it as breach of honor.
It's just a shocking generalization, and he doesn't stop at ethics. He goes after aesthetics, too. He claims women are incurable Philistines.
This is the aesthetic critique. He argues that women have no true appreciation for art, poetry, or music. He claims that if they act like they do, it's just a pretense to capture a man. It's coquetry disguised as culture. He points to the history of art and asks, where are the female Michelangelos? He refuses to accept social conditioning as an answer. He insists it's an intrinsic lack of the objectivity required for genius.
He also has a very specific beef with the European lady.
He does. He compares European marriage customs to those in the Geist. He praises the Eastern view where women are subordinate. He calls the European lady, the object of chivalry and reverence, a monstrosity. He thinks giving women equal rights or high status is a perversion of nature that makes them arrogant.
And this leads to his very strange argument about monogamy versus polygamy.
This is a social utility argument, and it's cold as ice. He claims that monogamy is unnatural and harmful to women as a whole. By forcing a one-to-one ratio, you create what he calls human sacrifices.
He's talking about women who don't find husbands.
Yes. Spinsters and prostitutes. He argues that in a polygamous society, every woman is provided for and can fulfill her biological purpose. In a monogamous society, if you don't secure a husband, you are left destitute or socially marginalized. He argues that polygamy is actually better for women as a group, even if it lowers the status of the first wife.
It's a harsh utilitarian view. It treats women entirely as functions of the species, specifically for reproduction and not as individuals.
Exactly. He believes the will of the species works through women to ensure the next generation, often at the expense of the individual's happiness or intellect. He sees romantic love as a trick the will plays on us to get us to reproduce.
All right, let's move on. Section 7, education, noise, and genius. He has some surprisingly modern and some very cranky opinions on these.
He starts with a strong opinion on how we raise children. He advocates for the natural method. He hates the way we teach children books first.
Concepts before observation.
Right. We teach a child the word gravity or politics before they have any lived experience of the world. He says this leads to a warped reality. We fill their heads with prejudices and abstractions before they can think for themselves. He says we should show them the world first. Let them see the stone fall, let them see human behavior, and then give them the name for it.
He actually recommends no philosophy or religion before age 15.
Stick to facts. Math, languages, history. Don't give them abstract systems of thought until they have the raw material of experience to understand them. Otherwise, they will just parrot words without meaning, which he thinks is worse than ignorance.
And finally, his great personal nemesis, noise.
Specifically, the cracking of whips in the street.
He really, really hates the whip cracking.
It's personal for him.
Yeah.
In the 19th century city streets, carriage drivers would crack their whips to encourage horses, and the sound was like a pistol shot. Schopenhauer writes about this with pure venom. He calls noise the assassin of thought.
Because it interrupts concentration.
He says a great mind is like a concave mirror. It focuses all its light, all its energy to a single point. Noise shatters that focus. If you are doing deep intellectual work, an interruption is a disaster. It breaks the chain of thought, and you can never quite forge it back together in the same way.
And he draws a direct correlation between tolerance of noise and intelligence.
He does. He says if you don't mind noise, it's a sure sign you have a coarse brain. If you have a dull mind, interruptions don't matter because you weren't thinking about anything important anyway. He even insults the German nation, saying they are called a musical nation, but that really just means they are obtuse because they tolerate so much noise in the streets.
So if you get annoyed by your neighbor's leaf blower, you might just be a genius.
According to Schopenhauer, yes, it's a sign of a high-functioning intellect, a badge of honor.
So what does this all mean? We've toured the suffering, the vanity, the gender wars, and the noise pollution. Schopenhauer paints such a relentlessly bleak picture. The world is a penal colony, happiness is a lie, and we are all just porcupines poking each other in the cold.
It is bleak, but it's also strangely liberating in a way. If you accept his premise that life is hard and happiness is a rare, fleeting negation of pain, you stop beating yourself up for not being ecstatic all the time.
You lower the bar.
You lower the bar to the floor. You develop a grim camaraderie with your fellow sufferers. You stop chasing these grand illusions of permanent happiness, and maybe you just find a quiet corner, avoid the noise, and contemplate the world.
You find your moderate distance.
Exactly. You cultivate your internal warmth so you don't need to freeze or be pricked.
Now, this brings us to our favorite segment, thought experiments. We like to take the text and push it to its logical and sometimes illogical limits.
Let's see if the pessimistic framework holds up under some modern pressure.
Experiment number 1, the boredom chamber.
Okay, set the scene.
Imagine a future society. AI and automation have solved every physical need. We have unlimited clean energy, so no poverty. We have perfect medicine, so no sickness until a painless death at exactly 100. We have full immersion virtual reality for any experience you want. No hunger, no sexual frustration, no bad weather.
So we have completely and utterly removed the need pull of the pendulum. We've eliminated all pain.
Completely. We are stuck permanently on the boredom pole. According to Schopenhauer, what happens to this society?
If Schopenhauer is right, this society collapses almost immediately. It's a vision of hell, not heaven. Without the resistance of need, without that atmospheric pressure he talked about, humanity explodes. We would see mass suicide on an unprecedented scale.
Just from boredom?
From unbearable, crushing boredom. Or we would see people inventing artificial conflicts, actual wars, just to feel the will engaged again. We might start fighting over the color of the sky in the VR machine, just to feel the struggle.
So utopia is actually the most dangerous scenario for humanity.
In his view, yes. The will must strive. It needs resistance. If you take away the object of striving, the will turns on itself. We would effectively eat ourselves alive out of sheer existential restlessness. It suggests that our problems are actually what keep us sane.
Wow. Okay. Experiment number 2, the amnesia immortality.
This tests his theory of the indestructible will.
Right. Imagine a technology, let's call it will transfer. You are about to die. You can pay $1 billion to have your will, your core drives, your character, your instincts, the fundamental essence of you uploaded into a brand new, genetically perfect biological body. A clone of you at age 25.
Okay, sounds good so far.
But the catch is, 0 memory is transferred. You won't remember your name, your family, your past life. You will just be a new person driven by the same internal forces in a new life.
Schopenhauer would say, why pay $1 billion? That happens for free. That is just reincarnation or the continuity of the species. He'd say that's exactly what death is.
Exactly. That is his argument. But the thought experiment is, would anyone buy it?
Absolutely not. The modern individual Thrasymachos from the dialogue would say no. If I don't remember being me, then I am dead. The market for this product would be 0. I don't care if A, being like me, continues. I want my memories, my story.
Which proves that we don't care about the will. We care about the phenomenon, the memory, the ego, the narrative of our life.
It highlights the disconnect. Schopenhauer says the will is the real, eternal part, but we are obsessed with the illusion, the temporary part. We would rather die with our memories than live forever without them. It proves how deeply trapped we are in the principium individuationis, the illusion of individuality. We are in love with our chains.
That is a lot to mull over. We are going to leave you there, contemplating your inner porcupine and the butcher in the field.
And please remember, these thought experiments are for entertainment and educational purposes only. Please do not go starting wars just to cure your boredom.
Good advice. Until next time, keep reading.